Hey guys, if you notice something new, I am very happy about it. I got this little microphone for my birthday, and this is the first time I'm actually able to use it. So it's this little microphone. I attached something into my phone. I found it for a decent price on Amazon. So this was a short-term solution to make my videos better, and so I don't have to scream across the room and I can talk at a normal volume. Very happy about this. Due to all of the issues I have editing, my videos are now officially a Sunday slash Monday kind of ordeal, to give myself a little bit of a grace period, as I fight my computer. Like we get into fist fights every single time, I swear. Is that all you have to say? Anyway, back on topic. Happy Sunday slash Monday now, and today we're going to be talking about the life story of Neville Longbottom, and I literally cried the entire time I was researching this, so fair warning, I'm gonna cry. Also, quick announcement before we get started. I am officially starting house points across all of my pages. And for YouTube, if you want house points towards your own house, when you comment, you can either include or just simply comment three of the hearts of your house sign. So Hufflepuff, yellow, Ravenclaw, blue, Gryffindor, red, and Slytherin, green. Just comment three hearts of the color of your house, and that is what gets you points. It will be at 5 points per comment on my YouTube that gets house points. But let's get into the actual content we're here to talk about today because we all love our Neville Longbottom so much and the tragic story of his parents and how really cool his grandmother was in the end. As many of us know, a lot of Neville's family thought he could have been a squib in his early life and that his family was just afraid of him being a squib and afraid of him not having any magical powers. But what a lot of people, or his family, both of his parents and his grandmother, had missed right after Neville had been born was that he had swaddled himself more tightly in his little blanket snug. He had tucked himself tighter, and the woman, the nurse, the word I can't think of, I don't know. The woman that wealthier families have that help them take care of their children had basically thought that Frank or Alice or somebody else had done that to Neville's swaddle. So because nobody noticed this, everybody realized, or everybody just thought that he wasn't magical, that he was showing no signs of magic. But the Quill of Acceptance, right? Yes, the Quill of Acceptance actually picked up on this, and I believe at this point tried to write Neville's name down in the Book of Admittance, but the Book of Admittance was like, no, that's not enough. So the way it works to get into Hogwarts is the Quill of Acceptance has to pick up on the magic, and then the Book of Acceptance has to allow the quill. I'm like always get confused and make sure I'm like saying the right name on the book and the quill. But then the Book of Admittance has to allow the quill to write in it. So the quill will want to put people's names down, but they could be a squib, and while they have magical ancestry, they might not possess magical powers themselves. So the quill is a lot more lenient than the book. As I had said, Neville's family really thought he was a squib and was trying to get magic out of him in any way they could. His uncle, his great uncle, really went to pretty extensive lengths, dropping him off piers and eventually was holding him over the balcony. And it was just a piece of pie. They're like, oh, who wants some pie? And he was like, oh shit, pie? Yeah, me, I do. And just drops Neville off of this balcony. And he's like, oh, crap. Hope he's magical. I hope he's okay. And Neville bounces like a little bouncy ball, I imagine. He bounces. So he survived a fall that should have ended him. And that was when the book was like, okay, fine, you can write his name down now. I guess he is magical. But it was after this incident where his great uncle had dropped him off the balcony. I think it's algae or something. No, we're not going to do that. It was after his great uncle had dropped him off the balcony and he had survived, thus proving he is a wizard. That was when his uncle bought him Trevor. We don't know exactly when his grandfather died, but grandfather Longbottom passed away and Neville saw him pass away. I don't think we even know how he died. I couldn't figure out how he died. He just simply passed away. And so Neville had to process death at a very young age, like Luna, although I don't know that his is as tragic as Luna and Pandora's story. But he had to process death at a very young age, thus giving him the ability to see Thestrals. The addition to seeing Neville in St. Mungo's when you play Hogwarts Mystery was the saddest and sweetest thing. I cried so much when I played that little quest. So, as Jacob's sibling, you, the player, go into St. Mungo's. You're on like this little quest for Hagrid to give the patients wizarding crackers, and it's around the holidays, it's around Christmas. But you're looking for the same ward that Neville's parents are in, and Neville's lost, and you're like, oh, I can help you there. Like, let's go. You take him to his parents. He kind of tells you about his parents. He tells you that he's proud of them and that he just wants to make them proud. And it's just so sweet because then you get to offer Neville some encouragement, sorry, that he will make them proud, and you get to give him a wizarding cracker, which he actually waits and opens on Christmas, and it's really sweet. Philosopher's Stone, we do meet Neville after he has lost Trevor on the Hogwarts Express, like immediately, is always losing everything. It's a great theme throughout the book. And he's actually with Hermione when she ends up in the cart and meets Harry and Ron. So he's there, they all meet at the same time, and then it's actually Hagrid who finds the toad and gives it back to Neville. Now, with the Sorting Hat on Neville's head, he had actually asked to be in Hufflepuff. And if you've watched my videos on the Sorting Hat, it gives you a choice. To some extent, the person has a choice over what house they're in because it's not based on what qualities you possess, but what you intrinsically value. Sorry, intrinsically, that word was hard to get out of my mouth. It's based on what you value. So Neville, despite being incredibly intimidated by Gryffindor, he valued the same principles. He valued the courage, the bravery, the kind-heartedness, being there for your friends, all those great qualities about Gryffindor. He valued them, but he was terrified. He was so terrified of disappointing his parents, disappointing his grandmother, them not being proud, not doing his parents justice, and knowing his parents were also Gryffindors. He didn't want to be any more of a disappointment than he already felt. So he asked to be in Hufflepuff just to kind of avoid that, to soften the blow. But the hat was like, absolutely not. You're going to do very well in Gryffindor. And he did. Night 1, Peeves drops an entire handful of walking sticks on his head. First potions lesson, he actually manages to melt Seamus's cauldron. How you melt a cauldron, the thing that is supposed to be indestructible enough to brew potions in, is truly a phenomenon and definitely put him on Snape's radar. And by the way, his grandparents never let him have a broom growing up because they were so afraid of him hurting himself. And first flying lesson, he breaks his wrist, and then Draco does the whole thing with the Remembrall, and Harry gets to be Seeker. I almost called him a snitch. He's not a snitch, he's a Seeker. But the whole thing with the Remembrall in the Great Hall and Neville and his missing robes, always a good scene. In a lovely little spat between Draco and his henchmen and Harry and Ron, Draco essentially challenges Harry to a duel, and Ron steps in and he's like, oh yeah, Harry knows how to duel and I'm his second, so we'll meet you at midnight, whatever they said. And so they go to meet for the duel, and Draco really just tricked them, tipped Filch off that they were in the hallway. Now, on the way out, Harry and Ron got passed by Hermione, who was like, you're not going anywhere. You're not getting us in trouble, and basically harassed them, following them out into, outside of the portrait, to which they found Neville, who had forgotten the password and had completely been locked out. So they brought Neville with them. The four of them realize it's a trap. They go running. They run into Fluffy. So Neville's actually there when they meet Fluffy for the first time, and then they all manage to make it back safely. In the movies, we get a scene where Draco has leg-locked Neville. That actually happens in the books, except Neville hops all the way to the common room for somebody to actually set him free. And at this point, the trio just tries to cheer him up, saying, you are worth, Harry's the one that actually says, you're worth 10 of Draco. You need to start standing up for yourself. Here's a chocolate frog. We believe in you. You're in Gryffindor for a reason. Stand up for yourself, dude. And it was Neville and that chocolate frog who incidentally was like, oh yeah, on Dumbledore's card, it says Nicholas Flamel. And they're like, Nicholas Flamel? So he helped. And then right after this, during a Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, it's like this whole verbal thing between Ron and Draco, and Ron really just can't let it go. Hermione's just focused on Harry, trying to, pay attention because Quirrell's trying to knock him off his broom at this point. I'm like 90% sure that this is all the same Quidditch match. I have been wrong before. I've been wrong about things I thought were correct before. So I'm like 90% sure this is the same Quidditch match where Quirrell was trying to not carry off his broom, that Ron and Neville get into a full-blown fist fight with Draco, Goyle, and Crabbe. And Neville takes on Goyle and Crabbe by himself. Ron leaves a good black eye on Draco. Neville's passed out, but, he's proud of himself. Another inconsistency between the books and the movies is that Ron is actually in the hospital wing because Norbert had bitten him. So Ron does not go to the Forbidden Forest for detention. Neville does, because Neville went with them to warn them. Well, he didn't go with them. He heard that Draco knew that they were going to give Charlie Weasley back the dragon, or not give him back, but give him the dragon in the astronomy tower that night. And so Neville goes to warn them. McGonagall had already caught Draco and then essentially said something along the lines of like, oh, you tricked Draco into being out late at night with the stories of a dragon, and you think it's funny that you got Neville too. And so Neville thinks that it was a prank, not that they were actually trying to help a dragon, and that they appreciated Neville for trying to help them and warn them and be a good friend to them. Neville was devastated. He cried in his room all night long. Not only did he disappoint his house, did he, disappoint his friends, disappoint, the rest of the Gryffindors, he disappointed himself, he disappointed his grandmother. It was a whole thing. And then he had to go to detention, and he also thought that it was a prank, and it was just sad. He cried in his bed all night. And then our very sweet moment where then he tries to stand up to the trio themselves, and then earns house points at the end, tipping Gryffindor over. And I think Dumbledore did a great job making sure Neville was the one that tipped the scales. And I think it was presented very beautifully. Now we get a little bit less of Neville in Chamber of Secrets, unfortunately. One of the biggest things is that he warns Ron about the Howler, but then he actually gets another one himself in the next book, and that's tragic. And then, as we know, the Pixies picked on him and picked him up and put him on the chandelier. I tried to think of enough words to try and make that babbling, bumbling band of baboons. Now, despite being proven a wizard, oh my gosh, I completely forgot to mention the tidbit that Neville has his father's wand. Okay, so despite the fact that this family is very well off, they're purebloods, they have a beautiful house. We actually know nothing about their house, but I assume it's beautiful because they're generational wealth from being purebloods and all these other things, blah, blah, blah. I don't need to get on that tangent today. But despite having wealth, the family still gives Neville his father's wand. They could totally buy him a new one. But Augusta Longbottom chooses to give Neville his father's wand because she wants him to live up to this expectation. And she puts so much pressure on him when he's just a kid. He's just a little kid. And she loved her son so much, and she loved her daughter-in-law so much, that she just wants them to be proud, and they're not able, they're not there to raise their son themselves. So Neville's just put in these shoes that are far too big for him to fill when he's so young, but he has his father's wand. And so, back to where I was. Despite being proven a wizard, despite being at Hogwarts, despite, when he does do well at things, Neville is terrified in Chamber of Secrets because he really believes that he is still on the line of being a squib. And despite being a pureblood, he feels like he's still in danger of this monster. So to counteract this, he buys a quote unquote evil smelling large green onion, this like purple crystal, and a rotting tail of newt to protect himself from he doesn't even know what. All you needed was a rooster, dude. Not a rotting tail of newt, a rooster. Also, a difference between the books and the movies is, when Lockhart tries to pair Harry and Ron up together in the dueling club, and Snape is like, Weasley's wand causes devastation with the simplest of spells. That line is actually about Neville. That Lockhart puts Neville and Justin like in pairs during the dueling club. And Snape says that about Neville. Now, one thing that was really accurate from book to movie was that Neville is the one that's, running down the stairs. Harry, come quick. I don't know who done it. And they go up and Harry's room is trash because Ginny ransacked it. But that's really all I have on Neville in Chamber of Secrets. So moving on to Prisoner of Azkaban. Okay, I just listened to a few of the videos I've already recorded, and I think there's there's something like some noise, some feedback that's happening on the mic. So I'm really sorry about that. I'm trying to talk quiet considering I'm holding it very close to my face. But I swear, every time I try to Make something about my YouTube better, it just gets worse. So, oh, kitty. Prisoner of Azkaban kicks off, and Harry's cart is full this year. After everything goes dark, Neville is also another one that doesn't crawl, but finds their way to Harry's cart. So it is the trio, Ginny, Neville, and Lupin all in one cart. And so Lupin makes sure to give everybody chocolate at the end. So he takes care of everyone there. Another school year is a whole other set of classes where Neville is trying his best, but not doing that great in class. I feel like he just doesn't do well under pressure. Like, that's kind of how I was to an extent of like, I was very capable, I was very smart, but if you put me under pressure like that, I crack, I fold. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I can't. I don't know. It's wishy-washy for me sometimes. In divinations class, Sybil makes a couple different prophecies or predictions about Neville, and one of which is that, he's going to break something, and he breaks 2 teacups, but that's not hard to guess with Neville. I love him, but it's not. He broke them while just trying to read tea leaves. He also got a chance to try and bow and introduce himself and make friends with Buckbeak, but Buckbeak kind of just like looked at him and didn't bow back, so Neville just slowly backed away. He was like, I don't know what to do here. I think Buckbeak just smelled his fear. And then potions class, Neville's potion was orange when it was supposed to be green. And then as motivation, if you want to call it that, Snape told Neville, he's like, at the end of class, I'm going to feed your frog the shrinking potion because it's supposed to be a shrinking potion. And this is your motivation because your frog should just simply shrink and then he'll be fine and we'll fix it. Neville was totally freaked out, totally scared. He was like, I can't do this. And Hermione was like whispering out of the side of her mouth, like whispering the correct answers to Neville and telling him what to do. And so the potion was correct. Trevor shrunk. Everybody was okay. But then while going over to Professor Lupin's class, Defense Against the Dark Arts, Snape essentially makes a comment telling Lupin not to trust Neville with anything important or anything particularly difficult unless Mrs. Granger is hissing the correct answer in his ear. To which Lupin immediately is like, okay, well, Neville's going to be the demonstrator in my class. He's the first one up. So then they go and have the Boggart class. To which, when a teacher actually provides help and gives him the care and the attention he needs, he actually does pretty well this class and is able to, with Lupin's help, successfully stop the Boggart. Now here's where the Howler comes in, because as we know, Neville is super, super, super forgetful. Oh, also, by the way, for the little Hogsmeade trips and everything, Augusta Longbottom went ahead and personally mailed Neville's permission slip to McGonagall because she figured that Neville would lose it. So anyway, in true fashion, Neville couldn't remember the passwords to get into the common room and took to writing them down on a piece of paper, to which he also lost that. But to Sirius Black's happy little delight, he found the paper and was able to get into the common room in an attempt to murder Peter Pettigrew in the bed of Ron Weasley. Was he just gonna was he gonna take the rat and then end him, or was he just gonna bye and just leave the screaming dying rat in Ron's bed? And everybody's like, what the hell just happened? Was that really his plan? McGonagall was honestly, I think, the angriest she's ever been in this moment. Neville was no longer allowed to go to Hogsmeade. He lost 50 points, and he was also no longer allowed to be trusted with the password to the common room. And I think this one's so funny. This is she is next level mad. She's like, you don't even get to know the password. You can sit outside with the security trolls and they'll stare at you until somebody else comes by and lets you in. She was so mad. So in the Great Hall, Neville gets a Howler. He tries to run. He tries to hide. He tries to open it in private, but it bursts open in the entrance hall and it makes it so much worse. And yeah, Neville really got it for that one. Now, Sybil might be crazy, but I love her. She had a couple prophecies or predictions about Neville, such as the teacups, like I mentioned. She had also predicted that he was going to be late to class and he was going to have to work really hard to keep up. And then at the end of the year, after the end of the year tests and stuff, she was like, don't tell anybody your results or you'll suffer terrible injuries. Now, Goblet of Fire Neville may not be talked about a whole lot, but there is so much about him in this one. It is so twisted. I also just really wish that we could have gotten some semblance of a bigger relationship between Harry and Neville as two people who both, that the prophecy both could have been about. They both were in the same boat in a lot of reasons, not growing up with their parents, feeling like an outsider in their own world and the bullying that they've experienced. Him and Neville had a lot in common. I'm really surprised he wasn't closer to him and that we didn't get more moments between them. I kind of wish we had that. To just kind of cover the basics on how twisted and layered this entire situation is. So, Neville, okay, I don't even know where to start. I want to make a point, however, to say that I think Neville was brave for standing up and offering. It wasn't like Moody picked on him. It wasn't like Barty Crouch Jr. picked on him. He offered it up. He chose to give the answer. What happened afterwards was horribly unfortunate, but he chose to give the answer. And I think that was really brave of him. And I think that was, one of the first few times where, not the first few times, he was brave in the first few books a little bit, but I think this was really brave on his part. So he gives the answer, and Moody goes Longbottom, right? And they just look at each other for a moment. They just look at each other, and it's sick and it's weird, and it's Barty Crouch Jr. looking at the child of the people that he went to Azkaban for, thinking about, all of his values, all of his stuff, what he went through being in Azkaban, thinking about, did he ever feel any guilt that he was the one that sent Neville's parents into insanity and that this meek little child grew up without parents? Did he feel any guilt doing Crucio directly in front of him? Was he thinking about Alice and Frank while doing Crucio directly in front of him? And Neville just gripped his desk and bit his teeth down, and Hermione screamed, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." And he stops. He then does chase Neville down, in the hallways, calls him to tea, gives him the book on the Mediterranean water creatures and such. But Neville thinks that this should be someone he should be able to trust. This man, Moody, was in awe with his parents. Moody would have cared about Neville. Moody would have looked out for him. He would have mentored him. So Neville probably thought this was somebody he could trust. He was impersonating somebody that Neville should have been able to trust. But also the idea that Barty Crouch Jr. was impersonating and having to wear the face of the person who had killed one of his best friends, Evan Rosier, and took that eye with him and gave him, how he got the magical eye. And then he also had to control himself being at the school with the person, Karkaroff, who ratted him out. So watching that Death Eater who ratted him out be afraid every single day, squirming every single day, knowing he wasn't loyal to Lord Voldemort, and Barty Crouch Jr. just waiting on that little nugget of information. There are just so many layers to this movie, and it's insane. But anyway, we're talking about Neville. Neville's not the one that tells Harry about the gillyweed. It's Dobby. Moody did intend Neville to do it, but Harry never asked for help, so he had to stage this whole thing with Dobby. But again, that's besides the point. Also, cute little fact, Neville had asked Hermione to go to the Yule Ball first, but Hermione had already said yes to Crumb, so he asked Ginny. And I really think that him and Ginny were a super cute little pair at the ball. Order of the Phoenix, we really see Neville come into his own, and a lot happens in this book. At this point, Harry is the only one that knows the truth about Neville's parents and that they're not dead, that they're actually in St. Mungo's. He's the only one. Oh, I'm so sorry that I just hit that microphone. At this point, Harry is the only one that knows the truth about Neville's parents. Nobody else has any idea. Harry's kept it completely to himself. He's been a good friend, but everybody else does find out at Christmas time in this book. Order of the Phoenix, we see Neville come into school with a Mimbletonia, if I'm saying that correctly. But essentially, this plant is, honestly, I think it's very fascinating. It's used to protect branches with bowtruckles, which is, protecting the bowtruckles themselves. But these are also the trees that would be perfect for making a wand from. But what they do is they kind of exude these like stink saps is essentially what it's called, I think. And it's just this like odor, like I think of it like just sap from a maple tree, but like really smelly. And that's just how my brain imagines it. But if collected properly, the stink saps, that's really hard to say, can be used to help nurse animals back to health. So for his birthday that year, his great uncle had got him one of those and he was learning to take care of it. As we all know, he loved herbology. And going into Hogwarts that year, it was just Harry, Ginny, Luna, and Neville. Ron and Hermione were off in like the little prefects area. This is like night one at the castle. Going into the common room, Harry doesn't even know the password yet. Neville lets him in, and as soon as he walks in, Seamus is on Harry's ass about being a liar. Oh, kitty cat Stretch, you're so cute. About being a liar and all this other stuff, and Neville immediately stands up for him, being like, my grandmother always said that Dumbledore or Voldemort was going to come back. If Dumbledore says that Voldemort's back, then he's back, and we've canceled our subscription to the Daily Prophet. So just immediately showing his support of Harry right there. It is noted that Neville was one of the very first to sign up for Dumbledore's army, and like I said earlier, he really comes into his own this year, and I'm already like getting to the point where I want to cry. We really see his bravery. Then Arthur is in St. Mungo's over Christmas after the attack with Nagini, and Harry, Hermione, and the entire Weasley family is there for him. And while they're in St. Mungo's, they see Neville. And it's so sad with the gum wrappers. Oh no. They basically are like, Neville, we had no idea. Harry still never lets on that he ever knew. Augusta Longbottom is like, what do you mean you didn't know? Neville, are you not proud of your parents? Like, they did not go through this. And he's like, no, I'm incredibly proud. I think it was, kind of a way to protect the family. But then Alice comes over and gives Neville just an empty gum wrapper. Just an empty gum wrapper. And his grandmother makes a comment, and she's like, you have enough of these to wallpaper your bedroom. Throw it away. And he's just puts it in his pocket. That was just, over the years, his mother just kept giving him these gum wrappers, and he kept every single one of them. And it breaks my heart. And then over the break, the Death Eaters who had tortured Frank and Alice escaped from Azkaban, meaning Barty Crouch Jr. has already been out. He's already been given the Dementor's kiss and then died soon after. So the last three, Bellatrix, Rodolphus, and Sebastian, Rodolphus's brother, they had broken free. Neville gets this news and he just changes. He changes. He doesn't talk anymore. He's not himself. He is focused. He is laser focused. But can you just imagine that realization that, it's real and this is happening and these people are out there again and they could come after you, and that Harry is teaching you these things for a reason, and that Voldemort is back and he just wants to make his parents proud. Trying to move on from crying, Neville starts working really hard. He is doing so well in Dumbledore's army. He is almost to the point where he is learning as fast as Hermione. He is picking up spells left and right. He's doing phenomenal. And mind you, this is all still with his father's wand. Now, in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, it is when Harry gets the vision and he's trying to figure out how to communicate with Sirius, and it is Hermione and Ginny? It was Ginny and Luna. He saw Ginny and Luna were trying to create a distraction, and they were, getting caught up with the Inquisitorial Squad. So Neville goes to help, and he himself gets caught by the Inquisitorial Squad and brought up where the trio already is. As Hermione has bamboozled Umbridge to going to the Forbidden Forest with Harry, the rest of them are stuck in there with the Inquisitorial Squad, and they used what they learned from Dumbledore's army to be able to get their way out and get out successfully. At this point, Harry's essentially like, I'm going by myself. I'm not getting you guys in trouble. Nobody's getting hurt because of me. And Neville's like, was that a game? Was that for shits and gigs? Was that just for fun? Why have we been going to classes all this time? That was not just for fun. We're coming with you. And Harry's like, okay, yeah, fine. You're right. We get to the battle. And Neville has to face his parents' torturers, and he fights so hard in the Battle of Mysteries. I mean, I'm sorry. At some point, his wand is broken, and he ends up with Hermione's wand because it's him, Harry, and Hermione, and Hermione's passed out. Harry tries to get Neville to take Hermione and go. He's like, no, I'm staying with you. They're trying to get Hermione out of there. They've disarmed Sebastian, or maybe it was Dolohov. Oh, the names are all mixing up. It was Dolohov that broke Neville's nose and his wand, but it was Sebastian, that Lestrange, the one that tortured his parents, that he disarmed and aims to help Harry, but also disarmed Harry at the same time. And then it was the three of them just trying to get out of there. So Neville just had Hermione's wand. And then he couldn't even speak correctly because his nose was broken, so he couldn't even use spells. So then he was like jamming Death Eaters in the eye with it. And then Bellatrix gets her hands on Neville, and that kills me every single time. Every single time where she's like, how's mom and dad? How's mom and dad? And the fact that she actually crucios Neville and he is willing to. I can't. And then Bellatrix gets a hold of our dear, dear, sweet Neville, and he is willing to face the fate that his parents did and get crucioed by the same person. God. He's very brave and he fights very valiantly in this battle. He's actually with Harry when the prophecy breaks, and he is one of the few that actually notice any of this is happening. And I am, again, 90% sure that it is only Harry and Neville that hear or notice the prophecy when it breaks. And to me, that kind of wants me to spin into a theory of, because the prophecy still could have been about Neville, or that it at one point could have been about Neville, that he could have also picked it up. And that's why he could also hear it. That is not developed at all. It is just a little thought that popped into my head. And because Neville's wand was broken, he had to get a new one before this year. So now he finally had a wand that was perfectly matched to him. And it was a cherry wood with a unicorn hair core. On the express to Hogwarts and Half-Blood Prince, it is Harry, Neville, and Luna on the way in, and Neville and Luna are both pretty annoyed that Harry's not continuing Dumbledore's army this year. But Harry just doesn't think it's a good idea, and they all kind of move on, but thankfully Neville doesn't lose his heart in this, and he's actually the one that brings it back next year. Still on the train ride to school this year, though, Slughorn invites Neville over to his little train cart to discuss, the Slug Club, things like that. It's really just his name was preceding him. And then Slughorn got to know him a little bit better, and he was like, no, I'm so sorry, you're not invited back. He was never a waiter in the book, I don't think. That was so unnecessary to do to him, but Neville, poor Neville. I also really like the way McGonagall treats Neville. I think she is kind to him, and I think this is one of their sweeter moments where she tells Neville that Augusta, his grandmother, needs to start being proud of the grandson that she has rather than the one she thinks she ought to have. And this is in response to Neville's owls. He got 4 owls. One was the highest, 2 was exceeds or outstanding. The 2 were exceeds expectations, and then 1 was acceptable. The acceptable one was transfigurations, and Neville still applied for Newt level classes, and McGonagall had to be like, honey, I'm sorry, no. And he was like, that's just fine. I didn't really want to. I was just doing it for my grandmother. And McGonagall was like, please go follow your heart and do herbology. She needs to start being proud of you. I'm pretty sure I ad-libbed there a little bit, but she still was like, you need to start being proud of yourself. She needs to start being proud of you. You're still a wonderful boy. And then there's the Astronomy Tower, or the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, where once again we see how brave Neville is. He gets injured. He gets pretty badly injured during this battle. I don't know that we exactly know how he gets injured. We just know that at one point Harry trips over an injured Neville, and that he has to be helped into Dumbledore's funeral because he's still recovering, but he just barely got cleared to be able to go to the funeral. But he is there. Him and Luna were, I think, the only ones that, besides the core group of people, I think, and then Ginny was also there. It was Neville, Luna, Ginny, and the trio that aided in the call for Dumbledore's army. None of the rest of them showed up, it was just them. And then it was the Order of the Phoenix. So Snape, when his scar started burning, he saw it was Hermione and Luna. He saw Hermione and Luna in the hallway, and he was like, alert the Order, tell them to go to this floor, and then hurried off on his own. Neville had been standing watch with Ginny and Ron at the Room of Requirement waiting for Draco to come out, to which Draco did. He used the Peruvian darkness powder and then guided himself and the Death Eaters for Hands of Glory. But Draco made the Death Eaters refrain from attacking them. And he was also very surprised that Fenrir Greyback was there. So can you imagine if Greyback got let loose in the castle and Draco just watched 3 of his classmates get shredded to pieces? Now, Deathly Hallows, Neville went through it, and never stood down, never gave up. It's just him, Ginny, and Luna, and whatever Dumbledore's army members that they still have. It's just the three of them running it. They get back, they immediately start it going. They're writing on the walls. Dumbledore's army's still recruiting. They're holding meetings. They're doing everything they can to fight against it. And I'm gonna cry. The line where Neville tells Harry that he saw, he paid attention to Harry defying the rules and how that gave so much inspiration, that Neville was rebelling against the Carrows and taking the punishment just so others would feel that there was hope and were inspired enough to keep fighting. Even the way he refuses to practice the Cruciatus Curse on first years, he is showing his cards, he is showing what side he's on, he is not afraid of what's going to happen, he is not afraid of the punishment he is going to receive. He does it so the other students don't give up. Neville was the best Gryffindor out of all of them. All of them. I mean, he's amazing. Catching word or knowing that the trio needed the sword of Gryffindor, or not Ron, Neville, Luna, and Ginny tried to sneak into Snape's office to steal the sword, except not knowing that the sword that they would have stolen was the fake one and that Snape had this whole plan. So it was after that Snape was like, all right, they probably need this sword pretty soon, and starts, doing his part of the plan and everything. But Snape finds a way to make sure they have detention with Hagrid so that way they're safe. We even know that they were chaining up first years, like they were doing truly awful things, and Neville realized that he was kind of instigating a little bit too much fight after one of the DA members, I think his name was Michael Corner, something along those lines. He was brutally tortured for freeing those chained first years. And so Neville was like, okay, we need to find a better way to fight. On the train ride home for the holidays, Luna was tragically ripped off of the train by Death Eaters as a way to convince Mr. Lovegood to turn over Harry and to do all of this stuff. But really mainly because of all the stuff he was still writing in the Quibbler, so Luna got taken. And then Ginny had to go into hiding after Ron was seen and their cover was blown, so Ginny couldn't come back, and it was just Neville. At this point, they were all very well aware of Neville's role in the rebellion, and they went after his grandmother. And, oh God, they go after Augusta Longbottom. And Augusta Longbottom is a bad bitch. She was not taking it at all. She fights off the Death Eaters. She gets away. She goes into hiding. I'm going to cry. She goes into hiding, and she gets a letter to Neville, and she tells him how proud she is. I can't. Okay. She tells him how proud she is of him, and that he finally made his parents proud, and he was living up to their legacy, and she said to keep fighting, to not give up, to keep fighting. Oh my gosh. Neville then found a new way to support everybody by making the Room of Requirement a safe place for Dumbledore's army members and for building or helping build a connection between the Room of Requirement and Aberforth's and Hogsmeade so that way they could all get fed. Now at this point, Neville was totally underground. They realized he was the ringleader. They were after him and they were like, yeah, you're done. Mark your, count your days, kid, count your days. And so he was like, oh no, I really gotta hide. Right before Harry goes into the forest, he tells Neville, if anything happens to Ron and Hermione, you have to kill the snake before you can kill Dumbledore. Harry knew what he was doing. He didn't think he was gonna come back. And he was like, you have to kill the snake. And, Neville said, yeah, I got you, dude. As they carry Harry's dead body back over to Hogwarts, Neville is the first to defy it, saying that they would never follow him, that Harry would have never given up on them, and that he was going to keep fighting. At this point, Voldemort points his wand at him. Neville's at his mercy. He can't really fight. He has, really been through it. And Fawkes brings and drops the Sorting Hat, to which Voldemort laughs. And he puts the hat on Neville's head, sets it on fire as the hat burned, and Neville had a full body bind on him, by the way. Was not supposed to be able to move. Dumbledore's like, ha ha ha, you can't move. I'm so prideful. I'm not even paying attention to you at this point. And Neville breaks out of that full body bind. Oh God. Pulls the Sword of Gryffindor out of the burning hat, and instantly slices off Nagini's head because of his close proximity to Voldemort at that time. Not only was Neville the one that defeated Nagini and the final Horcrux, he was also the one that took down Fenrir Greyback, that son of a bitch. It was him and Ron together. They finally managed to take him down. And then after the war, Neville continued to try and, I mean, I always thought him and Luna were really cute. I really liked them at the end, but I like him and Hannah a lot. So Hannah Abbott was a Hufflepuff at Hogwarts throughout their years and was in the same, I think was in the same grade as them. Pretty sure it was in the same year as them. But anyway, Hannah Abbott was a Hufflepuff. We actually see her in herbology classes in the movies, and she's also the blonde one with the sticker or the little Potter Stinks things in Goblet of Fire, and that whole like start of the ferret scene right before Harry tells Ron off, like, stay away from me. And he's like, okay, you came up to me and told me to stay away from you. But Neville actually went on to try and be an Auror, assumably to try and make his parents proud. He was an Auror for a little while, but then he was like, no, I want to be a herbology professor. And McGonagall welcomed him with open arms, and he took great care of all of his friends' children and kept good in touch with everybody and would routinely show off his Dumbledore. Oh my God, I can't. Why do I cry so much? Routinely showed off his Dumbledore's army coin. And that is the life story of Neville Longbottom. I hope this video was better with the microphone. I hope you didn't hate it. I hope it wasn't annoying. Tiny Dark Lord loves you all. He is taking a beautiful little nap. I hope to have this up by Sunday because I hate it being on my head. So I hope this is up as soon as possible. Not that this has anything to do with you. Just notes from the past. Notes from the past with Carrington. But yeah, leave some comments if you want some house points. And thank you so much for being here. And I love you all. And I hope you have a really great week. Bye.